What I want to talk about today is about protein. I mean, everybody's heard about it. We know that we need it to stay alive. So let's talk about it. The thing about protein is, not all people know exactly how much they need in a day-to-day basis. The only group of people that really think about their protein intake are athletes, bodybuilders, that's pretty much it, or health fanatics, which is a tiny minute proportion of us human beings. In the current literature, the recommended daily usage of protein is 0.8 grams of high quality protein per kilogram of body weight per day. This number has come from many people doing research and figuring out that that number is roughly the amounts that each person needs to intake to reach a balance between their nitrogen intake and their nitrogen output. Why nitrogen? Because amino acids, the key factor that makes them different from other chemical substances that we consume, is that they have a nitrogen molecule in it. The thing about that 0.8 grams per body weight per day is that many other studies have come out and have shown that more than that, specifically 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight per day has been shown to be useful for increasing body mass, as in muscle mass, and just generally being healthy. I came across this topic when I was listening to the Drive podcast, which is done by Peter Attia. You might know him. Amazing podcast, highly recommend. And he was interviewing Dr. Layman, and he is a scientist, a researcher that mostly has focused his research on protein and how much we need to intake, when we need to do it, and how we can do that to get the best results that we want personally. The way he described it was that we humans on average need around 300 grams of protein to just run our bodies smoothly. But the thing about that is, you don't actually need to consume all that amount, because you have a built-in mechanism in your body that recycles protein from stuff that already exists in your body, like your cells, your tissues, and all of that. But the thing about that is, obviously, if your intake of protein is higher, there's less of a need for your body to do the extra work to recycle the old tissue. On the topic of the consumption of protein, one topic that he brought up that I had never heard about before was protein bioavailability, which is measured through a measurement called the DIAS score. The way this system works is that if the source of protein is rated close to 100, that means that your digestive system doesn't need to spend all that much energy to break it down and use the amino acids in that protein in your body. But the lower the score is, that means the amount of energy that your body needs to put into breaking it down is a lot higher. Therefore, the return on investment is a lot lower. So not all of the amount of protein that is consumed through that source is actually being absorbed, and it ends up being defecated, or maybe not defecated. That's not the best word. It's not quite sexy. Excreted. There you go. Excreted is better. So for example, whey protein is scored in the high 90s, while wheat bran protein scores in the 40s. So what does this exactly mean? A lot of people's favorite breakfast cereal, Nutri-Grain, says on the package that it has around 8 grams of protein. To be exact, 8.7 grams of protein in it. But the thing that they don't tell you about it is that 40-something% of it is only bioavailable, meaning that the amount that your body actually ends up absorbing is only 3.5 grams. So next time you're going to eat that, think about that. The second topic that he brought up that is not that mind-blowing, but it was nice to articulate, was in regards to macro splits. Anybody that's ever tracked calories or gone to a dietitian knows about macro splits. They talk about it, say you need to eat certain percentage of carbs, usually 50%, and 30% protein, 20% fat, or the other way around, 20% protein, 30% fat. But the thing about that is, when you divide the amount of macros that you're taking and put into percentage, when you're, for example, trying to go through a calorie deficit and lose body fat, your total amount comes down. For example, if your normal day-to-day intake is 2,000 calories and you're giving 20% of protein, that ends up being around 112.5 grams of protein intake per day. that's reasonable. It's above the 80 grams, and so you're getting a decent amount in. But then if you're going to go into a calorie deficit and cut 500 calories, which is quite standard, you end up at 1500 calories, and the amount of protein that you'll get in will drastically come down. So yeah, if you're in a deficit, when you come down to 1500 calories, your 20% of protein ends up being around 75 grams of protein, which brings you below the 80 grams that you're supposed to intake. So why am I telling you this, and why did Dr. Layman bring this up? It's because he's an advocate for making your daily protein intake into a fixed number of grams, no matter what your goals with your body are. If you're trying to put on weight or lose weight, you at least get the minimum amounts that you've set for yourself, and then you distribute the rest of the calories that you have to fats and carbs. Obviously, if you're trying to put on weight and you want to increase the protein, go for it, but we're mostly talking about bringing it lower than the amount that you really need. Also, just to bring this around to the recycling mechanism that your body's got, that recycling mechanism seems to be quite efficient when you're young. So, when you're a young person and you cut your calories, you cut your protein, you might be able to get away with it and don't lose that much muscle mass and strength and all that because your recycling mechanism is picking up the slack. But the older you get, that recycling mechanism tends to become less efficient. So that exacerbates the amount that protein intake becomes more and more essential. The third topic they brought up that caught my attention was about breakfast. And I don't know what you guys do, but most of the year I am intermittent fasting. Depending on what I'm feeling, it's between 12 hours to 16 to 18 hours of fasting. And sometimes I worry about if the extended fasting that I'm doing every day is gonna affect my way of putting on mass in the gym. The thing that he talked about is that, well, yes, because when you're fasting, you're in a catabolic state, meaning that your body is practically eating itself. It's not obviously the best condition to put on muscle mass, but he said that if you are sufficiently trained, meaning that you've been working out for 6 months continuously or regularly, the amount that it affects your muscle gain is not enough for you to need to stop. Specifically for me, the intermittent fasting has been able to fix up my stomach issues, which I used to have acid reflux and stuff like that. So the cost and benefit definitely checks out for me. However, the main point that he brought up about breakfast that hit it home for me was in regards to a pathway in our cells which is called the mTOR pathway. The mTOR pathway is practically the gateway to kickstarting the muscle synthesis in your body. And muscle synthesis means building muscle in your body. It's just fancy nerd speak, as Huberman would say. So just to go over some basics, protein is made out of building blocks that are called amino acids. We have 20 amino acids in the world, and 9 of those are called essential amino acids, and that is because our human body cannot synthesize those itself. So we actually need to consume them for us to stay alive practically. One of those essential amino acids is called leucine, and the reason I'm talking about leucine is leucine has an effect on mTOR, which we talked about, and it actually causes mTOR to activate, meaning it leads to increased muscle synthesis if we have a high enough concentration of leucine in our body. And what constitutes a high enough leucine concentration in our body, you might ask? That apparently is 3 grams. 3 grams of leucine needs to be consumed and digested for it to get into the blood system, and that concentration will be enough to kickstart mTOR pathway. As leucine roughly makes up 10% of most protein sources, we roughly need around 25 to 30 grams of protein intake with our breakfast meal to kickstart the mTOR pathway and kick ourselves out of the catabolic state into anabolic state, which means synthesize muscle protein, which means bigger muscles. However, on the other hand, the thing that actually made me understand that I'm lacking a lot is that if you eat breakfast, your first meal that breaks your fast, and it has less than 20 grams of protein in it, the amount of leucine concentration, it doesn't reach the threshold, and practically you don't have enough juice to kickstart and shift gears from catabolic to anabolic. and that's something you might want to think about. All right, that's all I have for today. See you later. Ciao.